Let's see what we got here. We have Dr. Alex Orton logging in again. Wonder if that's somebody on our team.
That might
or your
be,
team. I don't know.
That might be my girlfriend.
Hey,
does she have to say? Oh, is it a different link if you want to join or watch? Probably. That's probably what it is.
Probably.
Okay.
But
it's okay.
That's okay.
We'll figure it out.
Let me see. Now I need to start this over here. And I think that's going to be going in just a second. Got it. Folks logging on. Beach laptop, that's a new one. Gene, or actually, I'm guessing that's Steve. How are you? And it might be, let's see, are we, most important question. Yeah, I did guess it right, Steve. Someday you'll have to tell me why you go by Gene on paper. And are we live? Are we live on the other place? Yes. Yes, we are. All right. Cool. Cool. Well, welcome to our regular members. Welcome to our guests on the call today. You have landed on Going Integrative Plus, where we get to ask the best and the brightest minds in cancer specifically, not just any old doctor, but doctors that specialize in cancer, see only cancer patients, or at least a good, very, healthy percentage of cancer patients, because we want really good answers to cancer, not just generic ones, answers from doctors that have been working with cancer for a long time and are in the trenches day in and day out. So that's what we do here. Members get to ask these folks anything and everything they want, week after week after week. It's a beautiful thing. I'm Ryan Sternagel. I would have given anything for this service, this program, when my son was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer just before his first birthday. But that wasn't available, and I actually ended up starting a podcast just so I could interview. I was like begging for 5 minutes of their time, and it's like, oh well, if I just start a podcast, then I can interview them for an hour, and that's actually much better. So that's what we did, and now we're doing everything we're doing, and it's just awesome to get to help people going through cancer in the way we're doing it. So yeah, you'll see how the call flows here, and check us out for future membership if you want to check us out. That being said, looks like a lighter turnout on the actual member front. 2 o'clock time is always an interesting, sometimes we get a lot of people, sometimes not as many people. I guess it's where are you, Dr. Orton?
I am in Chicago.
He's in Chicago.
Yes, sir.
How are you enjoying Chicago these days?
It's okay. Spring is really rough in Chicago. It's I say it's kind of like it's like bipolar. It'll go from like 70 down to 35, 60 rain, back down to 30. So it can be kind of a rough and lots of teases, but we're almost out of it. We're almost in the clear.
Yeah, and I saw in your little quick facts in your bio, you enjoy the Utah desert. So do I, because we live here, and not in the desert, up in Park City.
Oh,
but
nice.
Yeah, we have first winter where it snows like you'll get like a foot in November, and then it all goes away. And then we have second winter, which is like the regular winter, and we're just coming out of third winter now, when it all goes away, and then all of a sudden you're just getting, let's say, hey, I can wear a t-shirt, and then all of a sudden it dumps another 18 inches on you. So yeah,
I lived in Colorado, in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and if it wasn't snowing by Halloween, people were like, man, what's going on? If if first winter didn't hit by that time. So I know the feeling.
Yep. Yep. Well, this is all very good stuff. I'm really excited to have you here, Dr. Orton. As most folks know, and maybe we'll get into this a little after your bio and all the formalities and all that good stuff. But yeah, I was still am a big fan of the late great Dr. Gonzalez's work. Mary Beth, his wife, and his team were working tirelessly not to let that die. And I was really scared it was going to die, because I did not see people picking it up. I just thought organically, it would, hey, you know, people would just start, okay, what are these enzymes all about? What's the metabolic typing all about? Yes, coffee enemas have been around for a long time. You know, Gerson does them, but it's still not really a mainstream thing. And yeah, within the alternative, holistic, integrative, whatever you want to call it, space, I didn't really see anybody picking up the torch, and it made me really sad. And then Mary Beth told me about everything she was doing, and I got really happy. And now we've got Gonzalez trained practitioners. And you're not, of course, you're not a just, you know, you're your own man, Dr. Orton. You have your own practice and all that good stuff. But yeah, that's what connected the two of us. So I'm excited to jump into that. Let me if I was a prepared host, I would have had your bio already pulled up. There it is. Yeah, we'll do the long one and some of the fun facts. Dr. Alex Orton is a naturopathic doctor who started where many patients do, raised on processed food, prescribed drugs, fixed over the years. Actually, I'm going to, yeah, Dr. Orton had his own healing crisis, and he was healed. Dr. Orton is the lack of truly holistic healthcare that inspired Dr. Orton and Dr. Orada to start Haven, a holistic health center in Chicago. Haven creates individualized health programs for people to be educated and empowered to know exactly how to optimize their health and heal from chronic illness. Dr. Orton understands that healing is a journey. Indeed it is. It must be tailored towards each person. I saw a lot of customization in your programs, Dr. Orton. I'm excited to dig into that more. Big reason for this is we are walking our own health healing path every day. If you're seeking an opportunity to be empowered with your health, an opportunity to put your health on your shoulders, not on the shoulders of anyone else or anything else, he wants to be your guide. And let's just do a couple of these fun. Nobody's ever given me the fun facts before, which is awesome. Organic landscaping. What is organic landscaping actually, Dr. Orton?
I worked with a woman named the Compost Queen, and she made her own compost and then had a machine, like a big, I don't know how many gallon plastic tank with a big mesh bag, and she brewed her own compost tea, and she'd put it on a truck bed and then feed trees that were dying with like, you know, residential landscaping jobs that she had with the compost tea, and she would revive sick trees and bushes and things. So that's what that was.
And so she just made mass quantities of compost out of what?
Out of compost. So she put it in like a big mesh bag and brewed it like she brewed tea. Yeah.
I'm learning how to. We just got a greenhouse. Well, not just, but we've had a greenhouse for a little while, and I knew compost tea was a thing that I needed to get into, but haven't quite gotten into it yet. So it's essentially just compost that's brewed. All right.
Exactly.
Well, that's really, yeah, our forest around our house we're kind of in the middle of a big aspen grove, and it's not as good as it's not as vibrant as when we bought the place. So maybe I'll make huge quantities of compost tea. See what, and then the other thing that jumped out at me was 90s alternative rock. I love it.
Oh yeah.
That's my jam. I was in a rock band in high school. I had hair down to here, played the drums. Kind of like early Incubus, Hoobastanky type stuff.
Oh, nice, man.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So there you go. All right. And now that's enough of that. Doctor, so yeah, I just read your bio, talked about the Gonzalez Protocol, but yeah, I mean, let anything else you would like folks to know when it comes to you or your practice or what got you into it. I kind of skimmed over that part because I figured you could probably tell it better. And then I also like to ask, just when it comes to cancer, what's on your mind these days? Two-part question though. Start with just more on Dr. Orton.
Yes, sir. So what me and my buddy Colby, I grew up with Colby, so he's a friend and my colleague with Haven. We saw a real need in the alternative medicine space from what we were being exposed to at school, because a lot of what we were learning and a lot of what people were doing is what we call green allopathy. You're basically running blood work and then prescribing supplements in the same kind of philosophical foundation that you would do that with drugs, right? So in our perspective, that can help. It's not to say that, that's worthless. But when you have a chronic problem, typically that's not going to get you to the mountaintop, right? You need to have a plan that is addressing the true foundation of how we create health in the first place. And so much of that comes from the way that we live, the way that we think, what we do every day, our daily practices. It's like you can balance someone's blood sugar, but if they're running around like a crazy person and they're not eating barely throughout the day, then that's the real problem, right? So we found that a lot of what is still happening in the alternative space is still kind of Band-Aid, like, nice supplements to kind of help people to bolster their health, but not really having the conversation and the deep dive to understand where's this issue coming from and how can we create that in your life so that you can fundamentally heal and stay healthy for a long time. And that's what I really like about the Gonzalez Protocol, because the Gonzalez Protocol is about taking action into your own hands and making changes in the way that you live on a day-to-day basis, right? It's different in that way than many other cancer therapies and kind of degenerative, like treatments for degenerative disease that are getting more and more like technologically advanced with lasers and IVs and this and that. Again, has its place, can be very powerful. But I do believe that the foundation has to be there in order for those therapies to have the benefit that they're really going for, because if you're doing IVs and lasers on a faulty foundation, and the person's just going to revert back to where they were. So that's kind of, I got into the Gonzalez Protocol as a natural kind of progression of the framework that I was already coming from.
I do love all the shiny new things, the IVs and the lasers.
Sure, they're powerful.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I'm gonna have to steal that quote from you. The shiny new things, the lasers, the IVs, they're all well and good, but unless you're on a solid foundation, yeah, that's good. Yep. Very good. Yeah, and then well, I suppose Gonzalez is probably on your mind first and foremost these days, but I don't know. Anything, what's the last thing you thought about when it comes to cancer, or any new innovation that, innovation's the wrong word, because we just talked about shiny new things. And that's a real problem, by the way, everybody. Like, I actually, I'm actually not going to steal the quote from me, because I say it all the time, because I went through it with my son. We did have the foundation down. But still, I was never satisfied, and I was always looking for the next thing. And the minute I got the new, the energy medicine or the new supplement I was so excited about, now it's not exciting anymore. It's on to the next thing. And
yes,
it can create its own real stress, and fortunately it was me, not the patient themselves that was the one stressing out about all that stuff. He was too little to even know there was anything going on. But yeah, it's a big deal for people who are actually the ones trying to heal and doing the research. And and on the one hand, you should always be evaluating and doing your own research and learning and all that stuff. But at the it's a fine line between getting obsessive and stressed out about everything, and especially getting distracted by all the. That's what I like about my friend Chris Wark's work. He's very big on basics, 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 and then when then when you got room for something else, give it a try, but don't forget about the basics. But then within that, we have Dr. Orton actually, there's basics, but then there's also what are the basic things for you? How do we customize things? So they're actually working the best for you, and that's where the magic comes in. So yeah, I don't know. You want to? I keep on going back and forth between asking you about Gonzalez and just whatever's on your mind these days. That's our typical first question is what's on your mind, but then we're also talking about Gonzalez. But I don't know. You get the gist. What would you like to start us off with, Dr. Orton?
Yeah, you mentioned how you were kind of waiting at the edge of your seat for someone to like take up the torch with the Gonzalez protocol. And the reason why there was that delay, I can speak to that, is that Mary Beth and the people that she brought on her team, of course, Mary Beth is Dr. Gonzalez's wife, and who's the president of the Gonzalez Foundation. She really wanted to make sure that she honored Nick Gonzalez's legacy and really did the protocol justice, and of course you can understand if you're in the alternative medicine space, it's very easy for something to get a bad name or for people to misuse things and then have anecdotes that like really taint the whole picture, right? Which can then dissuade people who would otherwise benefit from it from doing it because they're seeing like a headline. So, I really applaud Mary Beth for her patience with it. She wanted to get it launched more than anyone. But we really took a lot of time to make sure that we did all the research and we compiled all the materials in a thoughtful manner. And we're just getting started. We have a big group and we're all seeing patients now that are going to the Gonzalez Foundation website. So it's exciting. It's still a new endeavor for all of us that are starting to see patients now. So it's great.
Yeah, so I have a flood of questions, but I will just jump into member questions. And yeah, folks joining us are our guests on the call today. When we do these guest calls, which is not always, a lot of times it's just us and the members, and that's it. But every once in a while we take in guests and let you see what we do here, that sort of thing. Yeah, we'll get through all the guest questions, and if there's time at the end, be typing your questions in, and first come, first serve. So yeah, at the end, if there's time allowing, we'll get to guest questions. But if you remember, you would be getting your questions first. Had to do a little selling there. So let's start off with Steve. Do you differ from Steve? What are you talking about with the WRT enzyme? Do you differ from Dr. G
with respect to enzymes?
Oh wow, I've never seen that abbreviation before. Is that where that might be it? With regard to, there it is.
Okay.
So yeah, we were talking about this a bit on a previous call. Is there, Dr. Gonzalez was using pancreatic enzymes, the what was it? And he was getting them formulated through Allergy Research Group. Has anything changed there as far as the official protocol goes, or do you have your own ideas on enzymes that you're adding to Dr. Gonzalez's work with? Or talk to us about enzymes, Gonzalez protocol versus what Dr. Orton thinks about enzymes.
Yes. So I'm doing the exact same thing that Dr. Gonzalez did with his patients. The enzyme issue was really important for Dr. Gonzalez when he broke away from Dr. Kelly, because what was happening was that the enzymes that Dr. Kelly was using were not formulated properly, is one of the issues that led to the Kelly program downfall. he was working with supplement companies, because remember, this was in the mid 80s. So supplement companies and supplement manufacturers were not nearly as prevalent as they are now. And there were some really poor manufacturing issues that were going on that were potentially leading to poor enzyme potency. And that was one of the factors, at least, that was causing problems for Dr. Kelly towards the end of that era of his practice. And Dr. Gonzalez ended up going his own way, and he had to figure out what he was going to do about the enzyme issue. And what he found is that the freeze-dried pancreas has enough of the enzymes in it to be potent to work at the right dosage, but it was also very stable because it has the fats and proteins and other things in the natural pancreas to keep it shelf stable for a long time. So, you know, reading through his books and understanding his logic makes perfect sense to me. It's easy to get them. They're widely available as glandulars. So that's still what we use. It's a tried and true method.
I want to come back to that in a second, but beach laptop, you're going to have to tell me if you're actually on a beach right now. I hope you are. But this is probably where we should have started. Can you give a brief overview of what the protocol is? Not overly familiar with it. Thank you. Yeah, and you know, I forget that Dr. Gonzalez was not around just yesterday anymore. It's been a little while, and he was my hero when we were going through the hot and heavy everything cancer with my son. But that was quite a few years ago now, and a refresher on exactly maybe, you know, even who Dr. Gonzalez was. Yeah, what the basics of his protocol. That's probably a real good way to start the call.
Sure. So Dr. Gonzalez was a journalist for Time magazine before he became interested in medicine. He went to medical school, and because of his journalistic background, was introduced through a friend to Dr. Kelly, who basically said, hey, you got to meet this guy. He's doing some really amazing things with cancer. Was kind of hesitant to meet him because Dr. Kelly had a lot of bad press from Steve McQueen passing away. Ended up meeting with him, was impressed by their initial conversation. Dr. Kelly convinced him to go out to Texas and look at his case files on the results that he was getting. And Dr. Gonzalez flew down there, looked at the case files, and he was like, holy crap, this is unlike anything I've ever seen before. Brought some cases back to Dr. Robert Good, who was his mentor at medical school. He looked at the case files, agreed. They were stage 3, stage 4, poor prognosis cases again and again that were still alive 5-10 years later, that had done a completely alternative treatment, which was just, you know, completely unheard of. So Dr. Gonzalez ended up studying with Dr. Kelly over at least a summer during medical school and into his residency, and then longer after that, and kind of was at a crossroads and had a really good immunology kind of fellowship that was laid before his feet with Dr. Robert Good. And he decided to go the other way and work with Dr. Kelly and learn Dr. Kelly's method. So this protocol was discovered by Dr. Kelly and formulated over the course of a decade, but there's basically 3 prongs to the protocol. Number 1 is an individualized diet, and it's a traditional whole foods diet that is anywhere from highly plant-based to highly animal-based, and in between, depending on your acid alkaline balance and your sympathetic parasympathetic balance. And different cancer types tend to fall into different categories along that spectrum and need oftentimes opposite diets. Prong number 2 is supplements and enzymes. There's a lot of supplements on the protocol because the idea is that you have to support the whole body with every vitamin and mineral that the body needs and support all the organs that are weak. So there's a lot of glandulars and then vitamins and minerals that are used at specific doses, depending on your metabolic type, where you're at on the metabolic spectrum, because just like food has acid and alkaline qualities that can affect where you're at and that balance, vitamins and minerals also do. So you have to get the right vitamins and minerals for your metabolic type to create balance, but you also need all of them, right? Because the body needs all of these essential nutrients. So you take a lot of supplements, including the pancreatic enzymes that are taken at high doses away from food. When you take them with food, they digest the food. When you take them away from food, they're actually absorbed into your bloodstream. And they've done studies to prove that this occurs, despite that they're going through your stomach, they're being exposed to stomach acid. They've done mouse studies where the enzymes remain completely intact, going through the GI right into the bloodstream. And when you take them in between meals, you're getting a high concentration going into your bloodstream, and that has an anti-cancer effect. That is going to produce a lot of waste material, along with the other waste material that you have to detoxify from, modern living for decades. So the third prong is detoxification routines that you do daily, weekly, and monthly. So there's daily detoxification routines like coffee enemas. You do some weekly routines like baths and things like this. And then monthly routines at alternating intervals of juice fasts and colon cleanses and liver flushes. So it's a really holistic program. You're covering a lot of different bases, and you kind of do this, every day. Basically, when you meet with we call ourselves Gonzalez Guardians, one of the docs that's educated in the Gonzalez Protocol, or Dr. Gonzalez or Dr. Kelly, they basically, have a initial intake with you and then get your evaluation results back and then go over your whole program. And then you implement that at home with the help of your family and friends. And you do that day in and day out.
That was a very good summary.
Great.
If I do say so myself. Thank you for that, Dr. Orton.
Absolutely.
And Beach Laptop is indeed looking at the ocean as she listens in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. I love it. If you're actually from there, fun fact, my great grandfather built Toller's Cove or Toller's Marina, kind of what he constructed his own dredge and built the whole thing out. And now just because he wanted a place for fishermen to gather, and now they're selling multi-million-dollar condos on the thing. Isn't that the way it goes? But back to Steve. And I think this is a good follow-up question especially to the concept of the metabolic typing. So that's interesting. I knew the metabolic typing applied to the diet, applied to the food. I guess I was not aware that the metabolic typing actually factored into, as far as the acid alkaline balance, that sort of thing, the individual supplements that were prescribed. Mm-hmm. And so how much customization is there when it comes to the supplements, strictly speaking, from the Gonzalez Protocol? And sorry, Steve, I cut you off because I thought this would be important. How much, okay, so you have a certain metabolic type. It's, this kind of range of supplements. What kind of happens from there with supplements? Is it this metabolic type gets these supplements, or are you still doing deficiency analyses and that sort of thing? Or does it come down to what kind of form of the vitamins they're getting? Or I would love more elaboration there. That'd be awesome.
Yes. So every person needs all the vitamins and minerals, but the amount can vary dramatically between one person and the other, especially depending on what nutrient we're talking about. So magnesium and calcium are a really good example of this phenomenon. Magnesium is very alkalinizing. So magnesium is needed in high amounts in the sympathetic dominant, overly acidic people. And you may give someone upwards of 1,000+ milligrams of magnesium a day. Now, calcium is acidifying. So you don't want to give someone who's already too acid a lot of calcium. And this is one of the theories behind why a lot of women, for example, are susceptible to breast cancer, because their doctors are recommending 2,000 milligrams of calcium a day because they have osteoporosis when they're postmenopausal. And if they're already too acidic, that's like throwing fuel on the fire. It's only going to make the issue worse. So with a person who's already too acidic, you don't want to go over a couple 100 milligrams of calcium. They still need calcium, but you need to be really careful of your ratios. That's going to be the exact opposite for someone who's already too alkaline. They need acidifying nutrients like calcium at high doses into the thousands plus, and lower amounts of magnesium. And that's a good example of a more extreme nutrient, because it has such a powerful effect on the nervous system specifically and on the acid alkaline balance. A lot of the other nutrients are going to be the gradient of difference between one side to the other isn't going to be as dramatic. But there is a gradient for really every vitamin and mineral that we use. So that's it. The dose is important. And then you also mentioned the form. Dr. Kelly and Dr. Gonzalez also found that certain forms of nutrients had an effect on the acid and alkaline balance as well. So citrate forms, for example, of the minerals tend to be more alkalinizing. Carbonate forms of the minerals tend to be more acidifying. So a lot of we call them carnivore types, the people that are parasympathetic dominant, overly alkaline, they're going to need carbonate forms of calcium, magnesium, etc. While the sympathetic dominant, overly acidic vegetarian types are going to need citrate forms of their minerals like magnesium citrate, calcium citrate, etc.
I love it. So it's the sympathetic dominant that tend to be acidic.
Correct.
Which I guess kind of makes sense. Yeah. But what if somebody was sympathetic dominant and had like a really severe calcium deficiency?
You would up the dosage of calcium, but you would do it carefully, and you would watch their acid alkaline balance and watch their symptoms and watch their condition. So it's a great question. If someone's deficient in something, they need that. It's essential. But you don't just haphazardly give them the highest dosage recommended, because that may cause problems.
I love it. Now this is a better place for Steve's question. Do you agree with the concept of food selection based on blood types?
I think that there's definitely good research and like case studies to show that there's something going on there. I mean, blood types is based on lectin reactions, right? And lectins are basically proteins that line your red blood cells. So they're completely different from food sensitivities, completely different from food intolerances. It's a totally different mechanism. Again, I know people that swear by, like both colleagues and patients and friends that swear by the blood type diet. So I think that there's something there as far as improving the digestibility and blood flow of that individual, because what happens when you eat lectin foods that are going to have like a lectin reaction with your red blood cells, they clump together. So it does have a kind of systemic effect, but it is fundamentally different from metabolic typing. In the blood typing world, type O's, for example, are going to be like the classic paleo style individuals. Type A's are the classic vegetarian. I still think it's theoretically possible, for example, to have a woman who gets breast cancer who's a type O. And in the Gonzalez world, that patient is almost always by definition a sympathetic dominant individual, because breast cancer is a sympathetic dominant, overly acidic condition. So I think that you can do some individualization. Like if you wanted to combine the two together, you could look at the charts for the blood type. And if someone was having continuous digestive issues, you could still, you could make some customization, getting rid of some of the negative foods, but ultimately it's kind of a different lens of looking at things.
And then I mean, it's probably a dissertation in and of itself, but what all goes into determining, I know just, you mentioned certain cancers, they're typically going to be one type or the other, just because that's the nature of the cancer, but what all goes into figuring out what metabolic type somebody is? Great
question. So the first thing that you want to look at is what we call like metabolic archetypes. And basically there's different symptoms that are correlated with different side of the metabolic spectrum, sympathetic and parasympathetic. And it really correlates to sympathetic and parasympathetic physiology. Sympathetic nervous system is a fight or flight branch of the nervous system. So this is going to be activated when there's a stress response. It's not bad. It just needs to be balanced with the parasympathetic system. We all need the sympathetic and the parasympathetic branch. But the sympathetic system, for example, is going to shunt blood to your cardiovascular system, to your muscles. It's going to dilate your pupils, can cause sweating, heat. It's going to shunt blood away from your digestive tract because you don't need to digest food when you're running from a tiger that's trying to eat you. So all the symptoms that are associated with the sympathetic nervous system are going to be seen in a heightened way or more frequently in someone that's sympathetic dominant. That's the opposite for someone who's parasympathetic dominant, which is the rest or digest branch of the nervous system. And again, when your parasympathetic system is turned on, that's going to bring blood to your digestive tract. That doesn't mean that you're going to have no digestive problems, but sympathetic dominant people tend to be constipated because they're not getting enough blood flow to their digestive tract and nerve firing to their digestive tract. So they're going to be backed up. Parasympathetic may have diarrhea because there's too much, right? Parasympathetic individuals tend to have an overly active immune system. So they tend to be the people with autoimmune issues, allergies, asthma, depressed, tired all the time, chronic viral infections, chronic fatigue. There's a reason why the paleo diet has become so popular for people with autoimmune conditions, because that's the diet that typically those individuals need. When you are too alkaline, in a too alkaline state, you're susceptible to all those chronic immune issues. So that red meat and animal fat is going to really acidify your system and put you in balance, strengthen your immune system, etc. So that's looking at just your symptoms, whether you're a doctor observing your patient, seeing your patient in your office, or even just reflecting on your own self, you can kind of see your tendency along the spectrum. Dr. Kelly actually developed a long questionnaire that was thousands of questions long in order to go through every single symptom that the nervous system can produce, like pupils constricted or dilated, skin dry or moist, flushing or pale, rigid muscles or flabby muscles, on and on and on, for every single system in the body, in order to really make sure that he was seeing the whole picture, not missing anything. It's very easy to look at something like high blood pressure or anxiety and be like, well, that person's sympathetic dominant. And we can't fall into the stereotypes because we may type the person incorrectly. So you can make some generalizations based on symptoms and the person's diagnosis. but unless you're looking at the whole picture, you could miss it. So that's one piece. A really important piece is looking at the person's acid alkaline balance. This can be pretty challenging to measure. A lot of people will do salivary, like pH testing, or urinary pH testing, but there's a lot of like checks and balances in the body that may make it so that you're testing acid on a pH strip, but it's really not indicative of the real tissue pH, which is what we really want to see. So we have our own experimental hair test that Dr. Gonzalez used in his practice. We also use that can measure both acid alkaline balance and sympathetic parasympathetic. There is some correlation as well with certain ranges on typical blood work, like complete blood counts, metabolic panels, lipid panels, urinalysis that Dr. Kelly worked out. And we're still trying to clinically assess the validity of the ranges that he worked out. And, if they're off, to tweak those ranges. But of course, there does seem to be some correlation with the minerals and pH and all these things that we can look at through blood work. That would only make sense that you'd see certain patterns with different types of people, but we haven't fully fleshed that out yet. So yeah, it can be challenging. It's obviously best to do it in, a clinical setting, but the Gonzalez Foundation does have a metabolic questionnaire that we've produced using Dr. Kelly's questionnaire and making some tweaks to it. So you can get a general idea of where you fall just with that questionnaire.
That would be, I've told myself to take that thing like 10 times now, because I want to know, I want to know at least by that questionnaire where I fall. And I still have yet to do it, but if I don't get distracted right after this call, I'm going to do it.
Nice.
And so you mentioned this was actually Steve's question. I really want to make sure to drill this in, because this is kind of the age old question. So he asked about measuring acidity or alkalinity, pH paper, the urine pH paper to judge. And then there's also the saliva pH paper. So you mentioned that, and I believe, paraphrasing, you said you use it, but it's not, could you just drill down on how reliable is the urine better than the saliva? Is the saliva better than the urine? Do you take it before you eat or after you eat, first thing in the morning? And then, what percentage of weight, whatever the best thing is, or maybe it's multiple things. And then what percentage of weight do you actually give that versus, the other things that you're measuring clinically?
So I don't use it. I don't have enough experience with it to tell you definitively how you would do it. My understanding is that it's like the concept where, for example, if calcium is high in your bloodstream, it may actually be low in your tissues. Same with estrogen. A lot of times women who are postmenopausal will check their blood serum estrogen and it will be low, but that's not actually a good indication of what's happening at the tissue level. So I think it's the same with salivary and urinary pH testing. There may be some correlation, but it's hard to tell whether, if you're peeing out an alkaline urine, if that's actually indicative that you're too alkaline, or if that's just your body's waste, your body's detoxification or release of that alkaline material. So I don't use it. I don't know how to actually type using those methods. I think that Dr. Kelly may have included that as part of the overall picture. But I think that if you just measure your salivary pH and it's acid and you say, I'm too acid, that's going to be wrong a lot of the time. So it has to be contextualized.
So then when you're bringing somebody back into balance between acidity and alkalinity, are you just looking at the overall markers and assuming that, that they are being brought back into balance if you're not actually, quote unquote, measuring alkalinity?
Yes. you will, so we will judge it by their clinical symptoms and condition is improving. I'd say that's the most important thing, is clinically they're doing better. They had insomnia, they're sleeping better. They had immune issues consistently, those are gone, right? They were anxious all the time, that's a lot better. So all these things, especially when it comes to a degenerative disease or like cancer, someone's improvement can, I mean, it can make a huge difference. It can be readily apparent that the person is fundamentally better, right? So that's obviously, I'd say, the best indication that we're on the right track. With the experimental hair test that we do, we can see those values getting closer and closer together. So oftentimes we'll run a hair test, we'll see that they're way off, they're way too acidic, or they're way too alkaline. And as they come closer to balance, we'll see those numbers get closer and closer. And we want them to be as close as possible. That's when we know their pH is balanced, their nervous system is balanced. Their blood work can also, like if their blood work is becoming more like centered in the range, that's obviously going to be an indication. So, you know, I think it's possible to do, like, if you could figure out how to do salivary urinary pH if you conducted a regimented, you know, experiment where you typed someone, you gave them a diet and supplements, you had them do it again, you see if it's getting closer to balanced or if it's getting farther away. I mean, maybe the more and more acid someone's urine gets, the more balanced they are. I don't know. But you see, so we do have different checks and balances to make sure that we're on the right track. We're not just shooting in the dark.
No, yeah, I was just curious. I did just going off of the saliva strip or the pee strip always seemed a little too good to be true for me. But yeah, no, thank you for diving into that, because I'm genuinely curious how you do go about measuring. And yeah, it's like if they're doing better, they're doing better at the end of the day.
Yes.
Steve, your question is probably the best follow-up question, but I'm going to try to jump around and make sure everybody gets their question in. That being said, it's just Chris so far. Chris, do you, kind of off the reservation here from what we were just talking about, do you recommend fenbendazole? And that's recommend. Before I go any further, I forgot the customary, nothing you see or hear here on Going Integrative Plus should be taken as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your healthcare professional or several healthcare professionals from varying disciplines. If it were me, that's what I would do. Dr. Orton is a doctor, but not your doctor, unless you want him to be your doctor. In which case you should give him a call after this call. But yeah, and recommends probably a strong word, but Dr. Orton, what are your thoughts on fenbendazole?
No experience with it, really. I'm open to using antiparasitics, antibiotics, antifungals, if they're safe to use. That's the biggest question that I have. In naturopathic medicine, the first principle is do no harm. So I think that there's so many options in the space of medicine and nature that to use a really strong medicine that's going to rob Peter to pay Paul and to damage your body is not worthwhile. And it's better to exhaust all other options first before you actually do damage to your organism. So I don't have experience using that. I can't really speak to it, but I would just say do your own research to understand the toxicity of that medication and the potential side effects. If something has, you know, when you look it up online, it has like a whole essay of side effects, and a lot of them are very common side effects, then that's speaking to some toxicity. But if there's only a small list of side effects and they're seen less frequently or even rarely, that's going to speak to the fact that it's not as toxic. So just do your own research. There's a lot of things out there to deal with parasites. So, you know, different people need different things.
Yeah. And then there's, yeah, it's, is it the fact that they had the cancer? Is it the fact they had parasites that resulted in cancer, or is the anti-parasitic medication somehow, does it have a direct anti-tumor, anti-cancer mechanism of action? little bit of both. Why the heck do antiparasitics seem to do so well with the scary germ that we've all been terrified of, or
Right.
told we're supposed to be terrified of the past couple of years? All interesting questions. Yeah. Let's see. This is a good follow-up question to the acid alkaline balance conversation. Steve's also asking what your thoughts are on using bicarbonates, good old bicarbonates, to balance alkaline acid, or I guess, yeah, in this case, alkalinize yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense with the metabolic typing model that that would have obviously a very alkalinizing effect, right? So I think the way that I've understood how bicarbonates were used specifically by Dr. Kelly is if someone was in acidosis, like acute acidosis, which would be defined by like all those sympathetic symptoms that I described. If you were in an acute state of experiencing those issues, like anxious and irritable, angry, potentially rapid heart rate and blood pressure, etc., you could potentially use bicarbonates to help push you out of that and to like come back to baseline. I don't have experience using them long term as a strategy for balancing your acid alkaline balance. I know that you could use magnesium bicarbonate is one form of magnesium that you can add to like carbonated water and mix it up, and you basically get like magnesium bicarb. And that again makes sense to me that would be very alkalinizing. So that's going to theoretically be good for someone who's overly acidic. There is one treatment for cancer that is very interesting to me. I wish I could remember this doctor's name. You may know Ryan. He's a Italian doctor that
Stephen Cheney.
Yeah, and he does the bicarb injections
straight into the tumor. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that makes perfect sense with the acid alkaline model that would work, especially considering that most visible tumors that you would be able to inject into are going to be solid tumors, and solid tumors are the ones that are overly acidic, sympathetic dominant. It's what we call the soft tumors or the immune system tumors like leukemia, lymphoma, sarcoma, myeloma, etc., that are too alkaline. So you're typically going to get like those visible tumors like coming out of the breast and other places with solid tumors that are too acid, and those are going to be very susceptible to that sodium bicarb injection because it's so alkalinizing. And what this doctor has observed is that like the tumor just involutes when you inject it with sodium bicarb. So I'm all for that treatment. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but theoretically it makes sense. It seems like it has good research and case studies behind it. If you have a tumor that's visible and you're easily able to inject into it, it seems like that would be useful. You just again have to make sure that you're always understanding this idea of metabolic typing, and that not every cancer is too acid. A lot of them are, but some cancers are too alkaline. And if you're doing things that are alkalinizing the body in an overly alkaline state already, that's going to cause major problems.
So is that a 100% ironclad rule of thumb there? The solid tumors are too acid, and the blood, lymph, bone-ish type et cetera, the emias and the omas, those are too alkaline? Is there any exceptions to that rule?
It's so consistent that I would almost say it's a rule. There's a few cancer types that will that tend to be more balanced or can jump from one to the other. The biggest the cancer type that has the biggest variety of metabolic types that you'll see clinically is melanoma. Melanoma tends to be a parasympathetic dominant alkaline cancer, but we can see that in patients that are too acidic as well. Sarcoma tends to be one that's overly alkaline. We'll see some patients that are balanced. On the other side of things, some individuals with prostate cancer may be more balanced than a lot of the other solid overly acidic tumors. Yes, liver, colon, lung, breast, ovary, etc. So they tend to shift more balanced. But with many of the cancer types, it's in the case studies we have, it's just so consistent that it would be a huge exception to what we observe for us to like see someone with leukemia who's actually too acidic. Like that's just something that I have never seen in any of the research I've done.
And so when we're talking about, just to be sure, we're on the, so it's when we're saying that cancer type is too acidic or too alkaline, does that also translate to the person is too acidic or too, like if you have a solid tumor, you as a person are going to be more acidic, not just, you know, quote unquote, the cancer is too acidic.
Correct. Yep. And I'm using these terms also interchangeably with sympathetic and parasympathetic dominant.
Yep.
So sympathetic and parasympathetic is kind of like a macro look at how the whole organism is functioning, because your autonomic nervous system is the part of your nervous system that controls every function in your body that's not in your conscious control, which is basically like every vital organ and every biological process, right? So an imbalance there is going to have a massive effect on the entire organism. And then the acid alkaline balance is really happening at the cellular level, at the tissue cellular level. And yes, you know, from this perspective, cancer isn't a local phenomenon. It's a system-wide organism issue of acid alkaline balance along with nutritional deficiency and toxicity. And you get all these things together chronically over years, if not decades, that's going to lead to cancer.
Joey, that was Dr. Simoncini in Italy. Simon, S-I-M-O-N, maybe C-C-I-N-I, something like that. But if you just, yeah, if you come somewhere close to that, type that in combination with baking soda, you'll get it. And then I had a really good follow-up to that, and the Simoncini thing, it'll come back. Virginia, what do you think of methylene blue?
I don't have a lot of experience with it at all. I'm very interested in it. I do follow the work of Dr. Raymond Peat, and Dr. Raymond Peat speaks highly of methylene blue. A lot of people in the kind of Ray Peat community will use methylene blue. So I think it's interesting. I'm open. I can't speak to it. I haven't done enough research. I don't have any personal experience using it myself or clinically.
Yeah, it's I would put that in the shiny new thing category.
Yeah.
Sure sounds awesome. Yeah. Oh, that was gonna be my follow-up. So the parasympathetic sympathetic balance. You know, you always hear, when we hear natural health interviews of any kind, it's usually talking about people that are too sympathetic dominant and you're too wound up, and you know, you got your cell phones ringing and your emails stressing you out and your notifications and the screens everywhere. It's like you're telling everybody just to, you know, rest, just relax, you know, find a way to relax. But what do you tell somebody that's too parasympathetic? You know, you need to get pissed off about things more, or you know, what exactly is the advice there going the other way?
It's so funny you brought that up because I read a story of Dr. Kelly working with a woman. It was actually Dr. Gonzalez that wrote this story, I believe, in his book Nutrition and the Autonomic Nervous System. And he witnessed a phone call with Dr. Kelly where he was treating this young girl who had a parasympathetic dominant cancer. I can't remember what kind, leukemia or lymphoma, something like that. And her mother was like a hippie type, and they were doing all these meditations on the beach, trying to, manifest healing. And Dr. Kelly said, basically, like, was yelling at the woman saying, you need to stop that right now and start showing her violent television shows and violent video games to get her wound up, because you're putting her into a parasympathetic of a state and she wasn't responding. Now that's a little extreme. Dr. Kelly was quite a character, but yeah, sympathetic and parasympathetic people are all going to experience stress. It's just the way that they deal with that is different. So a parasympathetic individual is going to be someone who takes on stress and internalizes it, can become depressed, lethargic, laying in bed all day, like that kind of picture, right? So it's just a different reaction. A sympathetic person is going to get all wound up, running 1,000,000 miles a minute, talking, thinking 1,000,000 miles a minute. It's just a different response. So for a parasympathetic person, going on a run or doing a boxing class, or doing something exciting could help to balance out their nervous system. They don't need a quiet gong meditation where they're sitting in silence and stillness for hours, because their nervous system is already putting them in that state. They need to get out, do something invigorating, and that's going to help to balance out that kind of an individual.
I love it. I'm learning a whole lot today. This is good. Back to one of Steve's earlier questions. You mentioned blood cells clumping up. Do you use dark field microscopy in your practice? If so, what areas of this tool would you consider fraudulent, misleading, etc.?
Again, I can't speak on it directly. It makes sense to me theoretically. If I treat most patients virtually. And if I had a brick and mortar practice where I was seeing people every day, I'd be very interested in doing education on dark field and seeing if it had merit. A lot of people that I trust, colleagues of mine and mentors, use dark field, and it seems, like the fact that it's so visual, where you can actually see organisms, for example, and clumping of blood cells, that has to mean something. But obviously it's all about how you interpret that information and what you do about it that's most important. So I'm sure there's a lot of strange theories around it. I'm sure there's certain things that are fraudulent. I can't speak to it directly. I just don't have enough experience in the space, but it's really interesting to me.
Speaking of 90s rock, I just realized you kind of remind me of Dave Grohl. Has anyone ever told you that before?
I may have gotten that before. I used to have hair down there.
You had the hair. Yeah. Nice.
Yep.
Is that a flannel you got on there?
I do. I am wearing flannel. Yes. So I'm rocking the part.
I love it. Although, yeah, Dave kind of disappointed me in later years, but a topic for another day. I just realized, in reading your bio, we kind of skipping between the long one and the short one, probably should mention Doctor of Naturopathic Medicine, valedictorian of his class, and then all these different trainings: somatic experiencing, yoga, holistic counseling, constitutional hydrotherapy, International Foundation for Nutrition and Health, and then of course the good old Gonzalez Protocol. You've done your homework, Dr. Orton, as we can all tell. But yeah, if that sparks any other questions for anybody, don't hesitate to ask. And we're just just to let our guests know, we are kind of, the members they're sporadically asking more questions, but I think we're going to get a chance to jump over to you guys here pretty soon, at least start mixing your questions in. Yeah, again, if you like what you're seeing, I think there's that button that's right below the screen. You can just click that and give us a whirl. No risk, 30 days, all that good stuff. We just want you to be happy. If it's something that helps with your journey, great. If not, no worries. All that sort of thing. And we have a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a very good community we got going here. Not just the calls, but as I'm sure just about everybody on this call knows, if you're going through cancer and also taking an integrative, holistic approach somewhere in between there and taking it very seriously, then all of a sudden you become, it's already kind of alienating to people. Don't know how to treat you when you're going through cancer, and now all of a sudden you're not eating all the things that they're eating, and you smell like weird essential oils all the time. And yeah, it can be a lonely path, but we all come together here. We got our community page that's not on Facebook, so anybody can get on it and ask away throughout the week. Does anybody have experience with the Gonzalez Protocol, Dr. Orton? Yes, they're both awesome. You should do it. All that good stuff. So there's my little mid-call sales pitch. Mary Frances, I have the book about the autonomous system and feel that I am mainly sympathetic, breast cancer, but I also have parasympathetic. Can you talk about this? So Mary Frances, are you saying that just some of your symptoms are parasympathetic? Maybe you get where she's going with this, Dr. Orton.
Yes, I do. We all are going to have a mix of symptoms from the sympathetic system to the parasympathetic, because we all both have those systems in our bodies. So that's why it can be difficult to parse out what your specific metabolic type is, because it's always going to be a mixed bag. It's very, very rare that you would just see one person that has only sympathetic symptoms and zero parasympathetic symptoms. So it's really about what is your body expressing most of the time, right? Now, again, if we're talking about breast cancer specifically, almost, again, I want to leave that space for there to be other variations in the universe. So I'm going to leave that little space, but almost always someone with breast cancer is going to be sympathetic dominant. But yeah, totally reasonable and likely to have other characteristics that you may consider parasympathetic at the same time.
A good related question, or kind of related question. When we talk about imbalances, Steve's asking where hormone imbalances come into play in your purview.
Yeah, I think two things come to mind right off the bat. There's a epidemic of hypothyroidism that's been happening for quite some time. When Broda Barnes wrote his book, Hypothyroid, The Unsuspected Illness, in the 70s, he estimated that 40% of Americans, I believe, were hypothyroid. And that is probably only gotten worse. One of the reasons why hypothyroidism is totally underdiagnosed is because the range for TSH, which is the main range that's used, the main variable that's used to diagnose hypothyroid, is so wide. And the reason why it was made that wide is because they were trying to only get 5% of the population outside of that range, because the idea was only 5% of people should be hypothyroid, but that's just not true. So a lot of people will have TSHs that are up in the 3s, 4s, 5s and be normal, which is like way too hypothyroid. TSH isn't even the best way to address thyroid. The best functional way to address that is taking your underarm temperature in the morning when you wake up before you rise out of bed. And then also at 1 p.m. when your thyroid is on average highest during the 24-hour circadian rhythm. And if you're not hitting 98.0 or 98.6 consistently, especially if you're consistently really low, then you're in a hypometabolic state and you're hypothyroid. And that's going to cause problems for healing, because healing is energy. If you don't have enough energy, you're not going to be able to heal as well. And there's actually a connection to this in the cancer treatment space, because Dr. Gerson, if you remember, gave all of his patients as part of his protocol thyroid. So it makes sense that he did that, because a lot of these issues, these degenerative issues, are happening in a hypometabolic state because the organism doesn't have enough energy to actually heal. So looking at thyroid, looking at adrenals, which are oftentimes really relatable, they're connected, are very, very important when it comes to optimizing someone's metabolism. And Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Kelly used glandulars as a main treatment to address those. Adrenal, thyroid, hypothalamus, pituitary, testicle, ovary, and all sorts of other different glandulars. So that's kind of how they adjust it. But it's very important to make sure that the person has enough metabolic energy to heal. Another issue is estrogen. A lot of cancers are going to happen in a estrogenic state. Estrogen is oftentimes misunderstood. Again, I defer to Raymond Pete again for the estrogen and thyroid conversation. He's a brilliant endocrinologist that I kind of tip my hat to, and I've researched a lot of his works and writings. But Raymond Pete explains that estrogen is so toxic and inflammatory to the individual that when you run estrogen through a healthy liver, it should metabolize it completely. There should be none left over. And that's because the organism prioritizes that, because it can cause so many problems when it gets out of balance. So being on birth control, being on estrogen pills when you're menopausal, having too high estrogen, even for men, it's a big problem in the modern age because there's so much birth control in the water supply, for example. Getting estrogen in check is really, really important when it comes to cancer, when it comes to just being healthy in general. And even just supporting your thyroid is going to have a really big impact on keeping estrogen balanced. And it's kind of a longer conversation, but that's just kind of, an overview.
So I got to know, is that like a bug zapper or some kind of energy medicine device that I hear in the background every once in a while?
Oh, I don't know. It might be that.
Oh, is it something going on with your connection? Okay.
Or it might be the microphone is going against my shirt. I'll open it up a little bit.
Yeah, it just seemed like it was like a zzz. It doesn't sound like your typical weird connection sound. I could have sworn there was like some electric thing happening in the background, but all right.
I wish I had that device that you described.
The bug zapper energy medicine device.
Yeah.
Steve, related question. Well, yeah, I'll get back to your other one. Well, actually, they're all good. They're all related. That's interesting. I didn't know this, Steve. Steve saying the old mercury thermometers are no longer available and the digital thermometers are terrible. Any advice? What do you like for taking temperature, Dr. Orton?
It's probably not perfect, but I think that the digital ones, I agree, they're not great. So you might want to validate it with like 2 thermometers, but I don't have any secret to that. I wish I could have a better answer, but I do think it's an important consideration.
And then Yeah, we got time. Another related question from Steve, all-star question asker of the day. What is the best way to lower estrogen in males?
Um, I would say fundamentally, supporting your thyroid, which keeps everything in check. Also supporting your digestive system, supporting your liver. If your liver is functioning optimally, then it's going to really detoxify everything. So coffee enemas, um, making sure that your digestive tract is clean and healthy and not inflamed, um, supporting your metabolism through, eating the right diet and supplements. All these things are going to put you in a anti-inflammatory state, which you can almost use high estrogen and inflammation interchangeably.
Patty, any suggestions for diet and supplements from someone with Lynch syndrome who has had colon and renal transitional urethral cancer with metastasis to lung? Yeah, Keytruda took care of the metastasis and cancer-free 4 years. All right, Patty, but still trying to figure out the protocol for staying cancer-free. So yeah, as far as, well, they got the colon and renal cancer, but then mixed in with the Lynch syndrome there, yeah, could metabolic typing ballpark with, any initial thoughts there,
I
Dr.
mean,
Orton?
yeah, initial thought is it's a sympathetic dominant condition. It's an overly acidic condition. So this individual needs, most likely needs a alkaline diet, being very careful of red meat intake, which is the most acidifying food. Being careful with fat intake, which is also very acidifying. So primary fuel source should be carbohydrates, natural sugars, good starches, vegetables, fruits. Definitely, you still need good protein. Every metabolic type needs good protein, but you want to have more leaner proteins, milk, dairy, eggs, fish, being careful with the meat for sure. And then taking alkalinizing nutrients, like magnesium, vitamin C, B vitamins. Those are some of the more alkalinizing nutrients.
So I just thought I got to ask, selfishly, and no worries if you don't have an answer on this, but and that I just started thinking about childhood cancers. Does that rule, apply, solid tumor, neuroblastoma, Wilms tumor versus ALL, CML, the rhabdomyosarcoma, that sort of thing? Does that parasympathetic, blood, lymph, etc., versus sympathetic solid tumor, does that cross over to childhood?
I can't tell you for sure. It makes sense that it would. I have no reason to believe that it wouldn't. A child is just a smaller adult, to some
Or a
degree.
small little human. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there are, when you talk to people that really work with childhood cancers, and there's only a few of them out there from the naturopathic holistic perspective.
Right.
They do classify it as a different animal in a lot of different regards. And
Yeah.
just the things that make perfect sense in adults do not apply to childhood cancer, just straight linearly like that. So that's why I asked. But now I'm gonna have to go grill some of my childhood cancer docs.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, I didn't know that your personal experience, Ryan, with your son, and working with kids is a whole nother ball game for many reasons, right? Um, Particularly because they're not in autonomous control of what's happening to them. So for someone to say, I want to do this, I want to do this treatment, I want to change my life and do all these things as an adult, they have that autonomy, right? So that's why, Dr. Gonzalez didn't treat childhood cancer cases. I think it would be a wonderful treatment, even if a child was going through conventional treatment, to make sure that they're just eating the right diet and taking good nutrients in combination with that. I think would be really helpful.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Virginia, how are you spelling? And this was actually a new doctor to me, Dr. Raymond. Was it Pete? How do you spell the last name?
Yeah, P-E-A-T.
P-E-A-T. You have to check them out. Mylene, could you please elaborate more on the relationship between thyroid and estrogen hormones? I think we covered it pretty well. Maybe that was asked a little earlier, but I don't know anything.
Yeah, there's a couple things that you could. So I'll just speak to some ways to address, like to evaluate this for most people. These ranges that I'm going to give, I'm not going to give exact ranges, but like kind of considerations when looking at certain blood values may be indicative of higher estrogen or lower thyroid. I'm not going to say it 100%. Again, it has to be contextualized in the whole picture. But for thyroid, for example, checking pulse and temperature when you wake up and at 1 p.m., very good indication of low thyroid. TSH to some degree, however, your TSH can be suppressed with high adrenaline. So some people are in a hyperadrenaline state. Their TSH is super low. Their doctor thinks that they're hyperthyroid and they want to ablate their thyroid with radioactive iodine or something, when really they're just hyperadrenal and their TSH is being suppressed. And again, you can figure that out if your pulse and temp is low. Cholesterol will also rise in a hypothyroid state to low thyroid, because your thyroid will convert cholesterol to all the other different hormones. So getting thyroid, taking thyroid is going to suppress your cholesterol in a good way. Having high cholesterol isn't bad. So let's just make that clear. It's not fundamentally bad to have high cholesterol. I'm sure most people in the alternative space probably have some indication of that now. Cholesterol is protective. That's why it's rising. But if your cholesterol is 300, it's because you're probably hypothyroid. And when you start taking thyroid, your cholesterol is going to go down directly after that. In order to convert your hormones from cholesterol, you need thyroid, you need vitamin A, D, E, and K, all the fat soluble vitamins. So, so looking at cholesterol can be important. You can also look at prolactin and parathyroid hormone, not typically run on standard blood tests, but if those are elevated, that also speaks to a high estrogen, low thyroid state. So you could run those and get another idea. So yeah, those are some ways of conceptualizing it, but really, to make it simple, thyroid is going to oppose estrogen or keep it in its place at the very least. So high estrogen state is going to probably equal a low thyroid state and vice versa.
Good comment from Mary Frances here. She bought the pamphlet New Hope for Cancer Victims by Dr. William Donald Kelly in a health food store back in the 70s. They had it behind the counter, not in view. That's
wow. And that's actually how the Kelly program started. It was a totally grassroots movement. And he was selling his book in little health food stores, which I'm sure were few and far between in the 70s. So that is a blast from the past, Mary.
That's great. That's great. And Audrey, my buddy Audrey, I know you. Good to see you here. Regarding the tumor type, would uterine/cervical cancer be considered soft and therefore alkaline? So where is uterine/cervical on the, I'm going to say it so I remember it 5 more times, sympathetic acid versus parasympathetic alkaline spectrum, Dr. Orton?
Uterine cervical cancer is going to be a solid tumor because it's growing out of the tissue. It's in the tissue. So it's a solid, hard tumor that's going to be acidic and sympathetic, typically.
So Joey, we try to, I always walk the fine line with asking doctors to give us medical advice based on no case history and not a very clear. Joey's asking anything, any thoughts on thyroid medication? You mentioned you start with natural stuff and then go to medications from there if nothing, but I don't know. Any thoughts on thyroid medication in general? Are there any that you kind of do go to at some point? Or
thyroid medication is it's kind of like a supplement. There's one caveat to that, which is I'm not a fan of Synthroid typically, because Synthroid is just T4 and you need a proper ratio of T3 and T4 in order for the whole system to work properly. So a lot of people who are hypothyroid are prescribed Synthroid as like the first line of medication, and their TSH may normalize, but they're still completely hypothyroid. Like if you do their pulse and temp, if you look at symptoms, they may have some minor change in symptomatology, but like they're fundamentally not better from Synthroid. So taking T3 can be helpful, taking a combination of T3 and T4, which is in a lot of the glandular type Armor, Nature Throid, WP Thyroid, Westroid. These are all like basically porcine, aka pig glandulars that are set to a certain standardized to a certain dose. So those are helpful for sure. And I think that there's some of the least toxic medications that are out there, honestly, because they're basically like supplements.
That is good to know. Very good to know. Well, looks like guest questions. Members, of course, if you got anything else, type away and I'll jump back to you. But let's jump to some of our guest questions. And just a note, Steve asked like 8 questions already. You could be asking all the questions you want each and every week. I love it. I love this program. Again, I wish I had this available to me and by the way, doctor, my son was diagnosed right before his 11 days before his first birthday, stage 4 neuroblastoma. And he will be 9 at the end of the month.
Great.
Yeah, just had our conventional oncologist is actually kind of getting tired of seeing us for MRIs. He keeps trying to kick us out, but my wife is, just give me one more MRI, make sure everything's good. But we're in a good spot. Great for you. Yeah. Barbara, have you just, and I was hoping we got to this because it's, talk about like fabled cancer therapies. Have you tried SEAC? What are your thoughts on SEAC, the good old SEAC-T, Dr. Orton?
Haven't tried it. I believe in herbs. I've been trained in herbs. I train in homeopathy, it's another version of herbal medicine that's energetic in nature. So a lot of the indications for herbs will actually translate to homeopathic indications. So they're kind of along the same spectrum. So I believe in various herbs' ability to detoxify the system, to drain lymph, etc. I can't speak to it. I don't have personal experience. As a general rule of thumb, again, I think it's really easy to grasp for things that are so simple like that, but it really, in my perspective, anything that has anti-cancer properties, let's say, has to be done in a setting in which there's many different variables that are being addressed that are probably not balanced. So I'm open to it. Dr. Gonzalez believed that the enzymes in the program, along with the other pillars that you do on a full program, was plenty to have the effect that he was looking for. So doing things like SEACT was not necessary. I think that it's also all of us can be susceptible to wanting to do every single thing that we read that's good. And that can also have a detrimental effect on the system, because you're going to get counteractions, and sometimes you can detoxify the body too much, for example. You have to really work with the body, listen to the body, understand what's happening. You can't just throw a bunch of things at it and have it deal with it, right? So when you really treat the body holistically, you're fundamentally working with nature, working with what the body is already trying to do. So you don't want to work against it by like throwing the kitchen sink at it. So just a word of warning to like, what Dr. Gonzalez always recommended his patients do, and what I say to my patients now is like, choose a path that you believe in your heart and soul 100% and go all in with that. And don't think that you have to do every single thing under the sun to get better.
Yeah. That's a good friend of the program by now. He comes on probably about once a quarter. Dr. Oscar Sierra is kind of our, I guess you could call him our Going Integrative resident herbalist that specializes in cancer. Whenever he comes on, he always gets asked about SEACT because, of course, it's herbs. He's an herbalist, and he always kind of poo-poos it because, well, yeah, it's okay, but I could, just have a consultation with you and determine the absolute best herbs for you, versus just throwing something off the shelf. But yeah, but then again, I don't know. We're kind of big on just rotating through things with general anti-cancer. Not this is our protocol or whatever, but if we're going to be drinking tea, then sometimes we'll drink some SEAC tea. Sometimes we'll drink some Jason Winters tea. Sometimes, so it's like, we throw it in there just because it's probably better than not doing it every once in a while. But yeah, when you get into this is going to be the be all end all. And yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a really good point that herbalism and homeopathy, just like Chinese medicine, you prescribe herbs and homeopathic remedies based on the person's very individual presentation of the issue. So again, it's just an easy kind of superficial way of looking at herbs like, oh, this herb is for this herb is for this homeopathic remedy is for this. That can work sometimes, for sure, because there are stereotypes. And the reason why those stereotypes occurred is because a lot of people that present with that issue have that certain energetic pattern that is treatable with that herb. But true herbalistic, holistic practice is going to match the herb with the person, not with the disease.
Mylene, back to member questions. Interesting follow-up to the Synthroid discussion. She read that Synthroid can increase the odds of breast cancer. Appreciate your thoughts on this. Have you come across that research, Dr. Orton?
I have not come across that research. I can't comment intelligibly about it because I just don't know about this, but maybe it has to do with kind of my fair warning about just taking only T4 and that kind of throwing off the metabolic state, but I can't comment on it.
Yeah, that's I think so to be working with a whole lot of folks going through cancer, you must, all of you guys must be learning something new every day. Because I mean, especially the type of person that would seek you out, they're the type of person that's, me, I was, glued to PubMed and then every doctor would have to be like, no, don't just take one study and think that's the gospel. And that's probably a good way to stay up on, the latest studies that are out there, though, is just listening to your patients. Yeah.
So many people are educated today. I mean, I'm sure, Ryan, that you could beat me hand over fist in like alternative cancer therapies that are out there. I kind of I know what, like, my lane and what I've studied. Of course, I've been exposed to different things, but People are so educated today, and I think that's really amazing that people are doing their own research and taking it into their own hands. That's what it's all about.
Indeed it is. Cheryl commented that she wasn't aware anyone but Dr. Linda Isaacs was perpetuating Dr. G's work. This is great news. Yes, it is. Is Dr. Isaacs involved in the official Gonzalez protocol now, or is she kind of off doing her own thing, or where does she land with everything current day?
She's off doing her own thing. She's practicing in Austin, seeing patients. It's great that she is, we need more, the more people that we have that are doing it properly, the better. So, yeah, she's not involved with the Gonzalez Foundation directly. We have, I think, 8 doctors in the Gonzalez Foundation that are practicing the Gonzalez protocol. And just because it's top of mind, the way that it works is that you apply to become a patient on the Gonzalez Foundation website and go through kind of a screening and application process. And then there's a directory in which you can choose the doctor that you want to work with. So yeah, we have that available, but Dr. Linda Isaacs is still holding down the fort as she has for a long time.
I was just in Austin. It's much warmer than it is in Park City right now.
Yeah.
Patty, any comments on TUDCA? Get a question on TUDCA every once in a while, and I'd always kind of vaguely remember what it is and look it up, and then I say, oh yeah, that's what it is, and then I forget what it is. TUDCA, TUDCA.
I've seen the name before. Can't comment. I don't have experience with it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, oh yeah, it's by Body Bio. I remember that every time I look it up.
Yep.
It is a good company, that's for sure.
Yep.
Let's see. Back to that's a good question, Cheryl. Can someone take, this is a guest question, Cheryl, can someone take enzymes as a preventative? What are your thoughts on, you don't have cancer, have a cancer diagnosis? Would it be a good idea to take some pancreatic enzymes here and there to make sure to keep it away?
Absolutely.
On an empty stomach. Absolutely.
Dr. Gonzalez did it. Dr. Kelly did it. It's a great way to put yourself in a good spot. What Dr. Gonzalez always said, which I agree with, is if you're going to do enzymes, you got to do the enemas, right? Because the enzymes are going to be doing continual cleanup. So it absolutely can work as a preventative measure, but don't do it without doing regular detoxification like coffee enemas to make sure that you're detoxifying the waste that may be produced by the enzymes properly.
That is a very important note. Amy, it's interesting. Another interesting question on the Gonzalez protocol. Is the protocol best for particular cancers? And obviously we just went through, how it gets applied very specifically to all sorts of different types of cancers. But, I know like Gerson is known, I think even on the Gerson Foundation website now, they have a list of kind of known cancers that it does really well for, and ones that you'd probably want to try something else. Is there any, I know it became famous with pancreatic cancer, but I don't know. Are there any that jump out as these you've seen them do the best, or the foundation has seen these types of cancers do the best on the protocol versus ones that are maybe more hit and miss, and anything like that? Or is it kind of even across the board?
It can theoretically treat everything across the board, but there's the main consideration for someone's ability to do the program, besides their ability to just do everything, take the supplements and all that, is the blood flow to the tumor site. So if there's more blood flow to the tumor site, it's going to be easier for the enzymes to get there. That makes leukemia, for example, very easily treated. I'll put easily in quotes, you know what I mean? It apparently, based on particularly Dr. Kelly's experience that I researched, he said that leukemia responds very well to the program because there is, leukemia is essentially happening in the bloodstream. So it's like there's a direct flow of enzymes that can go to the tumors. If you have cancer types that don't have good blood flow, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's harder to treat, but it takes longer. And sometimes time is not on your side when it comes to cancer, so it's a consideration. One example of this that's not a primary cancer type, but it is very common, is a tumor that happens in a radiation scar. So there's a lot of scarring in the area that is going to make it difficult for the enzymes to get to the tumor. So that's a consideration. That's where the bicarbonate injections may be really, really useful for someone like that, because if it's visible and you can inject into it, then that could be a really good alternative. But yeah, in general, the program can work with almost anything. You want to be aware of blood flow. Primary liver cancer can be a little bit tricky as well, because the liver is so fundamental to the detoxification process. It's involved in any cancer type. It's going to have a primary role. So that can be a little difficult. Again, it's been treated successfully by Dr. Kelly for sure. I believe Dr. Gonzalez, primary liver cancer. I believe he's got a case study in one of his Conquering Cancer books. So totally treatable. But yeah, some considerations there. And it's interesting what you said about Gerson. One of the reasons in our perspective why the Gerson therapy doesn't work with certain cancers is because obviously the Gerson therapy is an alkalinizing diet and supplement plan that's going to work very well with acidic sympathetic dominant tumors, but not well with leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma, sarcoma, et cetera. And I believe that they've been well aware of that. And there's a lot of correlations between the Gerson and the Gonzalez. Lots of correlations with the enemas, the juicing.
Both love the coffee enemas. Yeah.
Yeah. So
you said juicing as well was, I don't, when Gonzalez Protocol comes to mind, juicing does not come top of mind for me.
Yep. All patients that have cancer on the program should drink 4 cups of juice a day. It's not as much as the Gerson, but Gonzalez and Kelly totally recognized it as a way to get high amounts of enzymes, nutrients, minerals, and vitamins. Beta carotene, particularly carrot juice, is really prized in the Kelly Gonzalez model. So getting all those nutrients in a very easily digestible fashion. I've worked with many cancer patients that have had issues digesting food because a lot of digestive compromise. So juicing can be really helpful for those individuals.
How did I not know that? That's really interesting. And carrot, even carrot juice specifically with so where does that jive though with the parasympathetic sympathetic? Because juicing, I mean, I'm trying to think of an acidifying juice and I'm having a hard time.
Right.
Yeah. So if someone was, well, yeah. So it's if somebody was already alkaline. Oh, and that's what we're okay. So that's the question then is under the Gonzalez Kelly model, the Gonzalez protocol. I mean, are you still giving juice to the parasympathetic folks?
Great question. And it's so hard to get it straight. So
yeah, it is. Yeah.
You got it. Yeah.
Gymnastics there for a minute.
Yeah. You got it. So yes, carrots are quite neutral as far as the
Okay.
acid alkaline is concerned. And carrot juice is recommended for all types. Now, I want to say something about the parasympathetic types. It's not to say that you can't have any alkaline foods, right? I'd say the breakdown is like 70-30 or 60-40, but you're definitely emphasizing a lot of the acidic foods like red meat and fats and things like that. But parasympathetic folks can still have fruits, for sure. Tropical fruits are really good for those individuals actually, because high amounts of enzymes that they may be lacking in from not eating as much of the raw vegetarian style food that the sympathetic types eat. So getting that like high enzyme dose from tropical fruits can be really good for parasympathetic types. So they definitely had fruits. Green juicing would be something that you'd probably want to avoid for a parasympathetic individual, because leafy greens are one of the most alkalinizing foods that you can eat. So green juices, extremely alkalinizing. Salads, extremely alkalinizing. Citrus, lemons, limes, orange, grapefruit, extremely, extremely alkalinizing, which kind of can confuse some people because they consider like lemons to be acidic in taste, but they have what's called an alkaline ash, which means that when the body breaks it down, it leaves over alkaline components. So a squeeze of lemon or a hot lemon water is very, very good for sympathetic dominant folks. Orange juice can be really good for those types as well, but you definitely want to avoid that if you're parasympathetic dominant.
So now I have to ask where this fits in the Gonzalez model, Gonzalez protocol. I've interviewed Dr. Patrick Vickers of the Northern Baja Gerson Clinic several times. Probably Gerson's biggest modern day advocate in terms of, well, he gets out there and preaches the gospel more than anybody else I'm aware of. And you ask him the does sugar feed cancer question, and that gets him foaming into the mouth, and he'll talk your ear off for 20 minutes about how no, it feeds your healthy cells and all this sort of thing. Where does that question land? I mean, you just mentioned a lot of high sugar fruits and vegetables, that sort of thing. Yeah, and I know Dr. Gonzalez was not a fan of the keto diet in general, but on the flip side, is there any credence to the does sugar? And of course, we're talking natural fruit sugars here. Please don't go eat the Oreos and lollipops off the hospital snack cart. But yeah, when we're talking carrot apple juice, that sort of thing, any caution to fruit sugars under the Gonzalez model?
No, my understanding of it is that it's basically just a theoretical myth. I believe it was Otto Warburg that developed the idea that cancer, sugar feeds cancer, or that tumors like sugar. Let's put it that way. But I believe that Warburg also said that even if you brought the sugar down to zero, that wouldn't make the tumor go away in and of itself. So what you're going to do there is you're also going to really slow down your metabolism, because natural fruit sugars are used by the body very quickly as a form of energy. So you're going to rob Peter to pay Paul. If you're a sympathetic dominant individual, you're going to totally push yourself in the wrong direction. And, if you look at the diets that Dr. Gonzalez put people with stage 4 metastatic cancer on, they were high sugar diets. I mean, they were 4 vegetable juices a day, mostly carrot, which has high natural sugars, fruit multiple times a day, fruit juice if you'd like, throughout the day on top of your vegetable juices. So there's no evidence outside of the theoretical model to support that's real.
I love it. This just made my day. That's I can't believe maybe I did know it at one time and forgot it, but man, that's really good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe Dr. Vickers also, he brings up Warburg and says that Warburg's work was kind of bastardized
Yes.
/
Right.
misinterpreted to
Yes.
come to the conclusion that sugar feeds cancer, and that's nowhere did Warburg actually say that. You just kind of have to take his work and then follow it down a few more steps of your choosing to get to that conclusion. Yeah. Patty, are smoothies as good as juice?
No, I think that they're different. I think smoothies can be helpful, again, if you have a compromised digestive state.
Lots of good fiber.
Yep. But juice, when you make a carrot juice, you're putting like 8 carrots into 1 glass of carrot juice, and you can easily consume that. You wouldn't be able to do that with a smoothie, right? So they are different. It's not to say that smoothies aren't useful, but juices are really going to give you the quantity of fruits and vegetables, which is going to increase the mineral content, increase the vitamin content, increase the enzymes, particularly in a high concentration that you wouldn't be able to get through blending or eating.
Yeah, it's just mega nutrition that your stomach would explode if you tried to eat that many carrots, or even that many leaves of some kind. Yeah. And especially given the fact that the food today is X%, so some ridiculous number, not as nutritious as it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, so on and so forth. So yeah, it's got to go above and beyond, especially given that fact.
Yep.
Back to a guest question. Cheryl, where can one get similar glandular enzymes? So yeah, is it still the just good old Nutricology pancreatic enzymes that you're pointing people to?
Nutricology and Allergy Research Group. It's the same formula, basically.
Yeah.
It's coming from the same source. This question can't go without saying. I just need to kind of throw this out there that if you're struggling with this, I highly recommend working with a doctor that's educated in this protocol. To put this together on your own is going to be very difficult. Again, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but there's just so many variables to consider that you really want a guide in your corner to do this. So, if you want to take enzymes preventatively, that's great. I understand that people are all in different economic situations, family dynamics, and sometimes you're just doing the best you can. But I will encourage you to reach out to someone to actually get the full-fledged protocol and be able to be managed properly.
Yes, and that's I'd say that's one of the biggest. I mean, on this membership in particular, getting to ask a wide variety of doctors questions, but then a lot of people use it for doctor shopping because it's hard to just, shopping's a kind of a strong word, but yeah, I mean, it's tough to just get a feel for somebody just based off their website. But you sit on 4, 8, 12 of these calls, somebody, you're going to really vibe with somebody, especially, we just heard Fred on the Gonzalez, the Gonzalez Guardians. We just had Dr. Andre Williams on a few weeks back. So now you've heard from Dr. Andre, you've heard from Dr. Orton. I like them both cool guys. But yeah, maybe one of them vibes with you more than the other. So but that being said, Cheryl was actually asking for preventative purposes, and she was also asking any general guidance when it comes to the enzymes and prevention.
Away from meals, right when you wake up and right before you go to bed. Theoretically, someone could do 10 caps morning, 10 caps night, theoretically. But
Theoretically, hypothetically,
yeah,
maybe this is what I might do
yeah.
for me, for myself. Yes. 10K, are they all, is it just one dosage that you find with allergy research group and nutricology when you say 10 caps? It's been a while since I looked. Are there, is it just the one choice you have in terms of, I mean, yeah, I'm just making sure we're not telling people to take 10 caps of a higher dose versus a lower dose, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that they're the same. I believe there's 425 milligrams of pancreas in one cap of the allergy research group, and it looks like, I'm just looking on my computer, it looks like the same for nutricology. So yeah.
Very good. And Joey's probably gonna take us out. Well, we'll try to squeeze Steve, Joey, and Steve in, but Steve, if we miss you, you got your fill in, that's for sure. Joey, how about juicing beets as beneficial as carrot juice?
Um, I'm not sure. They have different properties. Definitely Dr. Gonzalez recommended juicing beets along with carrot, but in the Gonzalez protocol, carrot was kind of like the foundation for all the juicing. And my understanding of that is that it's particularly concentrated in nutrients, particularly beta carotene, which is very important to get enough vitamin A to support your immune system when you're dealing with the cancer process. So that was kind of the rationale for carrot juice, but I think juicing beets is great as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's our, yeah, we juice a whole lot of carrots, but then we juice a whole lot of everything else on top of it too, because it's all good stuff. Joey also said he juices ginger, lemon, and sunflower sprouts and apple. He's asking for your opinion, but I think you just gave it. It's all good.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, sunflower sprouts. I like it, Joey.
Yeah.
And yes, actually we got to fit this in because it's a very good question to take us out. Steve's asking about the difference in enzymes. So is taking serrapeptase and bromelain, for example, I mean, when you come across that, we were grilling Dr. Andre about this a few weeks ago, but the term proteolytic enzymes, but then pancreatic enzymes also get called proteolytic enzymes, but then they're kind of special. They're not just any old proteolytic enzyme, they're pancreatic enzymes for a specific purpose. So yeah, when we hear about quote unquote anti-cancer enzymes, serrapeptase, bromelain, trypsin, chymotrypsin, all these things, what makes pancreatic enzymes so much, special in that regard versus all these other known anti-cancer property enzymes that we hear about?
Yeah, great question. So I think it's a simplistic way to look at enzymes that it's literally digesting the tumor. Okay, and that may be occurring. But I think it's more useful to look at it as a signaling mechanism. So Dr. Beard, that discovered this concept that pancreatic enzymes have this anti-cancer effect, figured that out by looking at histology slides of this growing fetus that was growing into the mother's uterine wall. And what he noticed is that the growing fetal cell would invaginate into the mother's uterine wall, essentially invade it, and it had undifferentiated cells that would invade it and then would produce angiogenesis to start pulling from the mother's blood supply. And when he looked at that under the slide, histologically, it looked the exact same as what a cancer tumor looks like. And he asked himself, well, what stops that process from happening, from continuing in normal fetal development? And the beginning of the fetal pancreas production of enzymes stops the process. So there's something about the pancreas when it turns on in the fetus that prevents that process from continuing on further. And he noticed that again and again and again, that the day that stopped occurring, that proliferation stopped occurring, was the day that the pancreas turned on. So yes, there's probably a digestion happening with the enzymes, but the reason why pancreatic and particularly trypsin, chymotrypsin, is because it's a signaling mechanism for the stem cells that are seated all throughout the body that are starting to proliferate to stop doing that. And that's the best I can say about, again, I don't have any experience giving someone high doses of serapeptidase. So, and I wouldn't be willing to bet that chance because we already know the pancreatic enzymes work. So it's a good question, but that signaling, I think, is really the important thing.
I butchered that. I blended trypsin and chymotrypsin in with the non-pancreatic enzymes, trypsin, chymotrypsin. Those are the enzymes you find in pancreatic enzymes, or two of the prevalent ones. Dr. Orton, this has been a real treat, let us know. And you mentioned you work remotely, which is awesome. That's like the one good thing that came out of 2020 and beyond is a lot of restrictions got loosened up there. And I used to ask that question, do you work remotely? And people would kind of be really sheepish, but it seems like that's all out the window now. So that's a good thing. But yeah, let us, one more time recap where folks should go to learn about the Gonzalez Protocol, where folks go to learn about you, to work with you. Anything else what are you working on? Any special announcements you'd like to make, all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So probably the best place to go if you're interested in doing this protocol is the Gonzalez Foundation's website. They have a button that says apply here. And you'll go through an application process. You'll write a letter about your experience and why you want to do the program. And then you'll submit your lab work, and then they'll have an interview with you to kind of have a chat, make sure everything is good. And then if you pass through that application process, then you'll be able to choose from the directory a doctor that you want to work with. My website is havenholistichealth.com. And you can always schedule a free consultation on my website if you'd like to chat with me about moving forward with working together. But again, you can also do that through the Gonzalez Foundation. And if you do have cancer particularly, and you're looking to do this, I would recommend going through that route just so we can get all the information that we need. And what else can I report? We have an active social media presence on Instagram, Haven Holistic Health. So we're always trying to post new content and be, accessible to our community. So yeah, please, if you're interested in connecting, reach out, and I would love to chat with you.
I love it. Thanks for being here, everybody. One more time to our guests. Surely you can see how awesome this was and how valuable it would be to get to ask these questions to the best and brightest. And we're very selective about who we have on here. It's not just any old doctor. It's like the best people that I've ever interviewed for all the events we've done and all that stuff. I only take my favorite ones, or in Dr. Orton's case, folks that I thoroughly vet, that I deem to be awesome enough to be on the call. So yeah, and it's try us out for a month. If it doesn't work, we'll give you your money back. And it's ridiculous. I've been told we should probably be charging 5 times as much as we do for this, but we don't want to do that because it's people going through cancer, and we want to make it as accessible as it can be. Because we're just trying to help people. So it's, if you can afford a bottle of supplements a month, chop that in half and do the program and get the guidance that you need. Other than that, Dr. Orton, it's been a real, this has been great. One of my favorites I've had in quite some time. I learned a lot. Thanks to all of our members for being here. Thanks to all of our guests for being here. And We'll see everybody next time.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.